Malcolm X once said, if you want to hide something from a Negro, put it in a book. Now, this probably won't be one of the more popular videos on this channel, but this isn't a popularity contest. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the statistical data and see if old Malcolm had a point. Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Dr. Rivers, and in this video we are going to take a look at how much Black people spend on reading and education. Now, this data comes from the 2020 Consumer Expenditure Surveys. They were conducted by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they revealed some troubling information. They survey a segment of the population that's representative of the entire population to get an idea of where the money's coming from and how the money's being spent in these households. It contains consumer data across all demographics. And if you want to verify anything I've said in this video, there's a link down in the description. Click that link, it'll take you to the website, and you can download a copy of that data for yourself. So what they did was they took all the spending and then they break it down by racial groups of who spent what particular share that total amount, and that should reasonably mirror the population. So if you're 13% of the population, then that racial demographic should probably spend somewhere around 13% in that particular area, or make about 13% of the money in that particular area. That's just a baseline. That's not particularly true because as we know, different racial groups perform differently in different categories. So once again, we're focusing on reading and education. Now, the Black percent distribution of consumer units, or people who were families, households that were spending money, was 13.2%, which is roughly about the same in 2020 as the overall population of Blacks in the United States. So if we were 13.2% or 13% of the population, somewhere thereabouts, how much of the spending on reading and education do you think we spent? Before we get to the numbers, let's get to why this is even important at all. Why even look at this data? You know, going back to Malcolm X, when he said that if you want to hide something from a Negro, put it in a book. What was he saying? He was saying that Black people don't read. Now, when I first heard that, I felt some type of way. On one hand, I was slightly offended. On the other hand, I said, maybe he's got a point. So naturally, when you have these kind of questions, you try to find out an answer, and that's what we're doing here in the video. This is just about how much Blacks are spending on reading and education, how much money Blacks are spending, what share of the total amount spent on reading and education are Black people responsible for. So in order to better understand the impact that this is having on the Black community, we need to point out why these things are important. So first off, reading. Why is reading so important? Why is reading important to Black people? Why is reading especially important to Black children? Well, for one, reading helps us to develop a higher level of focus and concentration. Now, unlike the television where you just flip the thing on and take things in, when you're reading something, you have to sort things out in your own mind. So that causes you to form pictures and make connections in your mind. And overall, believe it or not, it actually increases your capacity to think. You know, I'm reminded of an old saying where it says, knowing is half the battle. What that was saying was that knowledge is the most vital step toward achieving or obtaining something. So in essence, getting what you want can all start with something as simple as picking up a book. So here are 6 things that reading a book can do for the reader. 1, reduce stress and aid relaxation. 2, improve concentration and memory. 3, expand your vocabulary. 4, strengthen your writing abilities. 5, enhance your knowledge. And 6, increase your imagination and your creativity. Sounds pretty simple. And again, what does this have to do with the Black community? Well, let's take a look at it. Stress reduction. Obviously, stress affects us all. It affects everyone. Everyone gets stressed out, right? And that stress can have a big effect on us mentally and on us physically as well. And as you may already know, in this country, white people tend to live longer than Black people. Now, I'm not saying this is the only reason, but I'm guessing that stress plays a big part in that. Now, this right here may it may vary depending on who you ask, but I'm willing to bet that you face some unique types of stress simply for being Black. Now, for some people, that might be a little difficult to wrap their minds around, but it's true. Now, this is not a pity party, it's just a reality. And if you doubt that, just turn on the news or visit social media and then tell me how you feel about it after that. So that being said, why not use every available tool to help reduce stress? Reading a book can help you do that. Concentration and memory. I'm sure you would agree that both concentration and memory are necessary to deal with a complicated world, right? Because basically concentration is just directing your energy and effort towards a particular activity, a particular subject, particular goal. And your memory is your ability to remember things. These things can include information, people, experiences. In short, both are important towards success. Both are required for us to reach our goals, and both can be improved through reading. Expanding the vocabulary. This is a big one for me. How often have you heard some Black people who just seem to butcher the language? It's almost like they wake up in the morning, they say, I'm gonna say everything I can in the worst possible way. It's almost as if they're demonstrating pride in being Black by not speaking the language correctly or anything close to it. Doesn't seem like a big deal on the surface, but there's some serious implications to that. But having a limited vocabulary actually limits your thinking. Reading helps you improve your vocabulary. In fact, it's been proven that with kids, the larger their vocabulary is when they're in kindergarten, it's kind of a predictor toward how well they're going to do in school. And I'm sure we can all agree that we need our Black babies to do well in school, right? We need them to become well-educated, intelligent, highly functioning human beings, correct? Okay, moving along. Enhancing knowledge. When we use our brains the right way, it actually has the ability to reorganize itself. It actually forms new connections between brain cells and neurons. And as a result of that, we can adapt more quickly to change. And it even increases our brain's capacity for memory and knowledge. You know, kind of all those things that we used to pick on nerds for back in the day. You know, we used to call them nerds. Yeah, turns out being a nerd can be kind of a good thing. So reading, it helps us enhance our knowledge. Increased imagination and creativity. Reading a book helps us to activate our imagination and our creativity. So first off, our imagination helps us deal with those unreal things, you know, the intangibles. They're not really real per se, but then our creativity kicks in, and that's where we can take things from the imaginary world and bring them into the real world. We can take something intangible and make something tangible out of it. And I'm pretty sure you would agree that's a valuable skill. In fact, it's our nature. We are creators. It's just that some of us haven't figured that out yet. That's why we're not doing that. Ultimately, they're both powerful aspects of our being. So why not enhance them with a book? So that's reading. How about education? Why is this important? Why do Black people, what does education have to do with Black people, the Black population? Why is it so important to Black children? Why is it so important to Black people, period? And to answer that question, we probably need to define what it really is first. So we'll start with the common definition of education. The common definition of education, in short, is basically teaching and receiving knowledge. Now that can be in school or it could be any other form of education. The root word for education is actually a Latin verb, educos, which means to develop or draw out from within. The key word here is from within. Within. Sometimes we tend to think of education as simply somebody pouring something into us, like it's all coming from the outside. But a truly educated person is somebody who's known how to develop the faculties within their own mind to achieve a definite chief aim. Right? I believe it was Napoleon Hill that said that in the book Think and Grow Rich, right? A definite chief aim We have to be able to focus on that and then call upon our own mental faculties in order to achieve that. So that's what an educated person can do. It's not so much as everything that's been put in, but it's our ability to take that information, marry that up with our own natural skills and ability, talents, mix that up, and then pull out what's really deep down inside of us and use that to get what we want. So in brief, education comes in three different forms. You have formal education, you have informal education, you have non-formal education. Formal education is basically that education that happens on school grounds. Essentially, it's formalized basic academic knowledge. This is the stuff that happens, from elementary school all the way out through college in a formal setting. You go to school, learn in the classroom. And typically, there are four basic traits of a formal education. It follows a particular structure of delivery. It's highly planned and deliberate. It's chronological and systematic. And it's subject-oriented and time-bound. Now, informal education, in contrast to formal education, informal education typically takes place outside of the classroom. Often, these are the things that happen between a parent and a child, or an uncle and a nephew, or big brother, little brother, that type of scenario. It can be something as simple as learning to cook or riding a bike. But in any case, 6 basic traits of an informal education are: it's an independent form of study with no definite syllabus. It's not pre-planned, doesn't have a proper timetable. It can be an experience that's gained through practice. You don't always have to pay for it. It's a lifelong process happening like in a natural way, and there are no certificates or degrees involved. That's informal education. Now, non-formal education. This is the education it typically refers to something like basic adult education, adult literacy education, or some type of skill development. It comes in all different forms and usually in like a non-systematic way. So some good examples are like a fitness program or community-based adult education courses. Even a lot of the free courses that you see on the internet, just free courses, that's non-formal education. So typically 7 basic traits of non-formal education. It takes place outside of the traditional education system. It's highly flexible and adjustable. Usually there's no age limit to get this type of education. There may or may not be certificates involved. It can be part-time or full-time. And it includes both theoretical and practical education. So now, that being said, we have reading, we have education. So who's spending what type of money on reading and education? In the categories, you have it broken down. It's white and all other races, and then there's Asian, and then there's Black. And again, Blacks make up 13.2% of the population. So you would expect to see about 13.2% share of the spending. But that's not what we saw. On reading, Blacks made up an 8% share. 8% share of the spending on reading came from the Black population, which is about 5 percentage points lower than the share of the population. And on education, it went up 0.1% to 8.1%. Now, keep in mind, even though we're 13% of the population, in this survey, Blacks made up about 10.2% of the spending. So we don't spend as much. Our share of spending is not as large as our share of the population to begin with, at least according to this survey. So what does that mean? Blacks aren't spending as much money as a lot of the other races in the survey, at least not in a way that could be compiled or the data could be collected through the survey. But here's an interesting observation. The Asian population, their spending represents about 5.3% of the aggregate annual expenditures. 5.3%. However, on reading, they made up 4.4% share on reading. However, on education, that number jumps up to 10.8. So here's a question. What does the Asian population know about education that we don't? Why do they spend over 2 times or twice their percentage of the population or their share of spending overall on education? What do they know about education that we don't? These are all great questions. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that down in the comment section. Hey, if you lasted this long, hats off to you. Most people want to see stuff bouncing around or hear some gossip or something like that. And stuff like this might actually bore them to death. But if you did hang out this long, why not make a comment down in the comment section? Let me know what you think about that. And if you thought it was good information, be sure to tap that like button. So here's my thought on why we as a collective, Black folks, don't spend as much on reading and education as you would expect. I mean, we live in a time where it's easy to get information for free. Just look at the way the internet is structured now, where you can, all the content that's available for free. Once upon a time, you had to pay money to get this information, but now they shifted that burden over to advertisers. So advertisers pay the money to the platform for the opportunity to get their message in front of you, the consumer. So there's a lot of stuff out there available for free. So in a way, it almost devalued it in the consumer's eyes. And a lot of our eyes, it's not worth spending money on, right? Why would I spend money on something I can get for free? And this is why I think you see in the Asian population, the number's so low when it comes to reading. Because instead of buying books, folks are just going online and getting the same information or some of the same information for free. However, when it comes to education, you got to pay the cost to be the boss. You see, you can't become a doctor or a lawyer without putting up some funds and paying for school. There are a lot of trades and specialties where you have to have a formalized education that you have to pay for in order to be qualified to work in those fields. I think this is why you see the numbers so high in the Asian community, because they recognize that and they're like, well, we'll spend the money so we can get these higher paying jobs. Almost like the old saying where they say, you got to pay the cost to be the boss. So if you look at the numbers, you can see that we are doing that in the Black community. It's not like we're not spending any money on reading and education. But as with anything else, we can do better. This entire video was about the benefits of reading and education. And based on the things that I talked about in the video, I would say it's worth the investment. Are we doing enough? Can we do better? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. And I'll see you on the next video. Peace.